So tonight is session 3 for our class meeting for the internship, and I want to, as your CC2, I want to take the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the tasks that you have coming up. You guys are doing a great job, and you should be feeling pretty good. You've learned how to navigate everything and know where things go, and you're just about to upload your first artifact into TaskStream. So that should be a good feeling to get that sort of off your plate and move on to the next one. Time is ticking by, and you're making a lot of progress. I've had some individual conferences with most of you over the last couple of weeks, and so that has been great. You know, I think everybody is, I can just tell that everybody's getting a little more settled with what you're doing. And so just remember that you can always reach out if you have some questions, and I'm happy to help you, you know, on an individual basis. I've been reviewing a lot of work. I have to tell you that, you know, please forgive me if I don't remember what I've said to you, because there's so many students that I'm a little bit, you know, after I read it and give the feedback and everything, I don't have a record of it. And so if I forget that, you'll just have to kind of remind me. But anyway, I'm happy to do that. Seen some really great stuff, and so I think you're doing well. So tonight, one of the first things that we want to talk about is Task 5. We're going to wrap up the AAPSL here, and actually that Task 5 needs to be completed, and you should be ready to upload your AAPSL into TaskStream next week. Next week is week 9. And I believe that's what's on your syllabus to finish that. So Task 5 is just it's a reflection of what you have done in the AAPSL. And so the AAPSL is about, you know, was all about looking at student achievement. And as an administrator, you will be doing that constantly. You will be reviewing data and deciding where you have gaps and problems, and what can we do about that. You're going to be pulling PLCs together, experts in whatever area it is, and trying to determine what interventions or what strategies need to change in order to increase that student achievement. So that is what we want you to learn from this artifact that you have done, is just the process of doing all of that. And so now in the in Task 5, you're going to be doing a narrative that is a reflection on the competencies that you have addressed in the AAPSL. So there are 9 competencies. Can we all just make sure that we have muted our mics so that we don't have any extra noise in here, because it really will mess up our recording, and all of you might need that. Okay. If everybody's mic is muted, we shouldn't have any background noise. Okay, so there are 9 competencies. If you will remember the document that has each of the 21 competencies listed, and it says that you need 3 evidences for each one of those competencies. So for example, communication says that you need to use artifact 1, 6, and an open-ended, and they all say an open-ended. All right, so there are 9 of those that have artifact 1, and artifact 1 is the whole AAPSL, all of those tasks together. So those, you don't have to write these down. You can go to that document. If you can't find that document, let me know, and I'll just send you another copy of it. But there are 9 of those: communication, conflict management, change management, creative thinking, delegation, organizational ability, the personal responsibility for performance, system thinking, and time management. Those 9 competencies you should have used in creating the AAPSL. So now you just need to reflect, go back and look at what you did in creating that AAPSL, creating your action plan, looking at your data. You sent communications to your principal, asking permission to have the PLC, to create the PLC. You sent communications to other teachers to join you in that PLC. You led the PLC meetings, so you had agendas and minutes. So there were lots of forms of communication. You communicated from the PLC back to your leadership team and maybe with your whole staff. There were lots of incidents where you used communication. So talk about that in your narrative. Talk about how you addressed communication in your narrative in task 5. And for each one of those, that's what you will do. Now, if you want to put some subheadings of those different competencies, that would be good. You could just put like communication and then just address that. How did you show your competence with communication during the creation of the AAPSL, and for each one of those 9. But now your directions for task 5 says that you have to address 12 competencies. That's what we want you to do for this first semester. And so, well, actually, you're going to have 21 competencies altogether, but for the AAPSL, you're going to address 12. So you're going to do those 9, and then just select any other 3 competencies that maybe you have had an experience from your hours, your log sheet, the clinical hours that you've been, just something that you have done in your school. So if you had to make a judgment call on something in your school, maybe that would be a competency that you could address, but just take something from your clinical experience to for those other 3. And that will give you 12 competencies that you're going to write about in that task 5. Now that your task 5 does not have to be peer reviewed, and it does not have to have a Zoom conference. So you're going to write your task 5, and then you're going to put all of your tasks together in one document. It's kind of preferred, and I've probably told some of you both ways, because in the past we've just been uploading it, just putting it all together. But I learned this week that the evaluators would really prefer that you have like task 1, you know, just put them all together and just put your subheadings, task 1 and then task 2 and so forth, and you put the references at the end of your paper and any appendices at the end. But so you're going to, after you complete the writing of task 5, then you're just going to put it all together and you're going to upload it into TaskStream. Okay? Are there any questions about that? If you have a question, just unmute your mic.
Dr.
Yes.
Can you please repeat those 9 required ones again?
Yes.
Slowly, please.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time doing that. I'll send you that sheet, okay, that has those on there. I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
I'll send that to you. And let's see. So there are those 9. Everybody should have those, but if you don't have that document, I'll send it to you. Anybody else?
The evidence for each of the documents, are we supposed to upload those 2 at the same time in TaskStream?
The evidence for the competencies?
Competencies, the agendas, the minutes, things like that.
You, if you want to include that in your task 5, you can. Your task 5 could just be your narrative, but you will be doing those evidences in your competency folio. So the explanations that you're writing in task 5, you can use those same explanations in your competency folio. And in the competency folio, you have to upload your evidence. So you'd have to have a copy of the email or that agenda, minutes or whatever it is that you're going to reference. You have to have a copy of those. You upload a link to those evidences. I'm going to start next week, sort of round 2, or later this week and next week. I'm going to start round 2 of our individual conferences, and that is, I'm going to address the competency folio with you. I'll send you some more information about setting up your competency folio, but I will help you on an individual basis to make sure that you have that set up and that you are ready to put those evidences in that competency folio. So over the next couple of weeks, I should be able to get to everybody. Any other questions?
Yes, Dr. Whitaker, this is Kendra.
Yes.
So is it possible that something that's in our appendix in one of our tasks, that you'll see that again in the competency portfolio?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes. And that's fine. Okay. That's fine for that to be in several places. And also in your competency folio, you know how on your log sheet when you're doing your hours, if you were leading a PLC meeting, that might cover several competencies. It might cover communication. There could have been a conflict in the meeting, and so you have conflict management. It could be judgment, time management, organizational ability. It could be several of those competencies. And so it's okay in that competency folio to upload that evidence more than once. It's just that your explanation would be addressing whichever competency that is. You know, you would talk about how you used communication if you were using the evidence for communication. If you're using that same agenda or the minutes from the PLC meeting and you were addressing conflict management, you would need to tell what happened in the meeting and how you addressed conflict management.
Okay, so what with my task 5, I guess I was a little, and I may still be correct, but I did a lot of explaining things that were on my log.
Yes.
So when I talked about communication, it may not have been in my AAPSL, some of the things that I did, but I talked about I kind of elaborated on what I put on the log. Is that okay?
Well, you do have to address the AAPSL though, okay?
Yes, so with the nine competencies, but okay.
To have both.
Okay.
It's okay to have both, but for those 9 that it tells you that you have to use artifact 1, you need to use that. So in your narrative for task 5, make sure that you have addressed the AAPSL. If you you can have other things from your log sheet, but you got to make sure that you have those 9.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have a question about task 5?
I do. So is there a certain length for task 5 that needs to be done, or we just write it to explain what we did and then include the 9 competencies? And then at the end, we include all the tasks for, so there's only one cover sheet for this thing. And then the subtitle will be task 1, write everything out. Then at the end, include all our references from all 4 tasks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So task 5, you know, there's not a certain length, but you're addressing 12 competencies in detail. So I'd say that probably would end up being, you know, 6 pages or so, 6 or 7 pages, probably at least. Okay, because a half a page or so to explain what that is. You need more than a sentence, you know, for each one of those. So I'd say a good paragraph, you know, a good meaty paragraph for each one of those. So, you know, 5, 6, 7 pages at least for task 5. So then you'll put all of that together. You're right. And then you'll upload that into TaskStream. Anybody else?
One other question, maybe. Might be one other question, might be more. The annotated bibliography that we did of the references, we don't need to include those references in our reference page, do we? That final reference page?
Yes, I would.
So also take those same and put them at the end?
I would.
Okay. Okay.
I would put them at the end too.
So we could potentially have a 3-page reference list. Is that normal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All right. I'm going to move on just a little bit, and then I'll, you know, if you think of something else, I'll answer any of your questions at the end. But the other piece that I wanted to go over with you, because this is our last class session where you have to do this, but you're going to move right on into the first task of the AAPTEL. And so that's your second artifact, is the AAPTEL. And there are 4 tasks in the AAPTEL. And your first one, you are supposed to Zoom. That means you'll have to have it read and peer reviewed, and you're ready to do your Zoom session the week of November 6th. So you've got 2 or 3 weeks here, you know, to kind of finish up this AAPSL, finish up that task 5, get it, you know, loaded up next week, and then you've got another week or so before you have to Zoom to work on this AAPTEL. But you're going to start your second artifact, which is task 1 of the AAPTEL, and on this one, you're going to be focused on teacher empowerment and leadership. So in the first artifact, you were focused on student achievement. And now in this second artifact, you're going to be focused on the staff, on the teachers, teacher empowerment and leadership. Remember what I told you about always going to that rubric. So when you write, you know, look at your directions for your prompt and try to follow those directions for the prompt and start writing your narrative. Always go back and reference under the value of 4 what that rubric is saying you need to have in that narrative. So after you sort of write your rough draft, then you go back and look at that rubric and make sure that you have covered all of the points that are in that rubric. If you can say, yes, I've covered all of that pretty well, then you should be, you know, in pretty good shape before you start your peer reviews. And remember that I'm always willing to read and review your work too after you do your peer reviews. That's not something that I have to do. You don't have to send it to me, but if you want to, you can. So that's just kind of an extra step in there. But if you feel like it's strong and your peers say it's strong, you know, you could just go on with that if you want to. But in the first task, what you're going to be doing is you got to do research, okay? There's a pretty good research piece in here. You need to have an extensive literature review with your bibliography, okay, with your references, that is going to, you're going to focus on 5 different areas. And if you look at your prompt, you don't have to write down what I'm saying, because I'm looking at the rubric page and the prompt directions. And so there are 5 areas that you're going to address as far as the teacher empowerment and the teacher leadership. And one of those is building efficacy and empowerment among the staff. And so you can, when you're writing your narrative, when you're doing your research, you can use these 5 sections as like your subheadings, okay? And then look for your reference, look for your, you know, what the literature says about efficacy and empowerment for teachers. The second one is results-oriented professional development. The third one is recruitment, placement, and mentoring of staff. The fourth one is approaches for evaluation of the staff. And the last one is teacher leadership and decision making. So when you start your narrative for task 1 of the AAPTEL, it's going to be a research, it's going to be a literature review, and you need to get a lot of information. I would say you need at least 3 different authors for each one of those areas. Now, you might use somebody like Marzano might say something about all of those areas, and so you can use him as one of those in all of those areas if you know, if you deem that that's appropriate. But you need to know what at least 3 different people are saying about professional development, so that you have some comparison there of what's being said about it. That's what you're talking about when you talk about an extensive literature review. You want to know what the literature out there is saying about each of these topics. All right. So I'm going to give you some authors. And I tell you what, when I send you the recording, when I send the email with the recording of this session, I'll just type this information. I'll put those 5 things in there, those subheadings, and I'll type these authors down in that email for you, okay? One of them is Thornburg and Mungai. And then do for, remember you already looked at what do for said about PLCs in the first task, in the first artifact. Marzano is a big person, and Marzano and Dean have teamed together on some of this. And then Mrs. Darlene Hammond and Todd Whitaker. So those are some of the big names that you would probably want to include. Look to see what these people have said, but you might come across a few others that you want to include as well. But I would definitely look at what those people have to say about those topics. So you're going to do this literature review. I'd say that's probably going to end up being at least 8 pages, okay? There's no way to put just there's not really a definite number on that, but most of you have been writing, most all of your tasks that I have reviewed, they're lengthy, and they're well described and everything. So I don't think any of you have been running short, like none of you are making a bullet list or anything like that, and that's not what this is about. So, but it said your rubric says that it's an extensive literature review. So like I said, you need to have several authors on each of those topics and kind of find out what all is being said about them. And then the second prompt that you have, this is still a part of task 1, you have to make a checklist. You want to make a checklist of what some of those best practices are. You don't have to list every single thing that you came across in the lit review, but just think about the major ones that you think would be very effective, would make a big impact in your school. And you're going to make a checklist. And this checklist you're going to use in task 2, because you're going to do some walkthrough observations in your school to see, here's what the literature said is the best practices, and here's what's happening in my school. And then as you keep moving into task 3, you're going to see where the gaps are, and then you will address, recommendations of how you're going to close some of those gaps. Remember, we're talking about staff. We're talking about PD, building efficacy among the staff members, getting the best teachers, having them in the right place, mentoring our new teachers, evaluating the teachers, and also just building that teacher leadership. So those are the kinds of things that you're looking for on that checklist. What are things that make a teacher a leader teacher? And so you're going to look for those particular things. So 2 things that you have to do for task 1, you're going to do an extensive literature review on those 5 topics. And then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to create a checklist that could be used as a walkthrough as you go through looking at what staff in your school are doing. Are they using the best practices that you found in your literature review? So like I said, if you take next week to complete 5 and get that AAPSL all uploaded and off of your plate, then you have that whole to work on this task 1 and be ready to Zoom sometime during the week of November 6th, whenever you're through.
Dr. Whitaker, can you please repeat what you just said? I can't really hear you.
Okay. Volume is up. About the task 1.
Yes, it was just like the last 2 sentences you said, something about November 6th.
Yes, November 6th is the week that you're supposed to be doing your Zoom with your peers about task 1. So you should have it written and maybe share your papers with your peers somewhere around November 6th, and then sometime that week, however you all are scheduling your reviews or your Zoom sessions to review that, you should be doing that sometime that week of November the 6th. So again, task 1 has 2 parts, the literature review and that checklist of the best practices that you're going to use for a walkthrough. You don't have to do any walkthroughs. You're just making the checklist. Okay? You're making the checklist of the best practices.
Dr. Whitaker, how does this particular task differ from our task 3 from the AAPSL? Is it a more extensive or is it similar?
It's similar. It's just that task artifact 1, the AAPSL, was all about student achievement. And now you're looking at the staff.
Right, but as far as the literature review, the structure of the literature review.
Well, this is you did that annotated bibliography in the
Right.
which was just a little short paragraph. You know, you found a reference and you told what was in that reference. This is a little bit more like I want you to, you know, tell what Todd Whitaker says about efficacy, tell what Darlene Hammond says about it, tell what Marzano says about it, and then you could say something like Marzano and Whitaker, or you know, agree with such and such, or maybe. So
almost like a synthesis of it.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're going to tell what each one of them says, and then make the synthesis of
Do the synthesis. Okay. All right.
Put the references at the end of the paper.
Oh, at the end instead of like we set it up before.
Cite them in your narrative, and then put the reference. Yeah, you don't put that whole reference in the paper like.
Okay.
Right. Put your references at the end and cite it at the end of, you know, the sentence or the paragraph. You know, if that's something Whitaker said, then you put that at the end. Put the year, Whitaker 2009. Okay, just follow your APA format on that.
Okay.
Right? Okay, anybody else? I think you will find this quite interesting when you get started, and you know, it'll be a little bit lengthy, you know, pulling that research together, but I think you'll find it quite interesting. And these are, these are all areas that you would find too on your teacher working condition survey. So, you know, that's something that you don't have to use that in task 1, but you could begin to look at that if you wanted to, because it's something that you probably will look at to see where your school is compared to what the research says should be happening there. Okay? Is everybody excited? Any more questions? All right. Well, I'm not going to keep you long tonight. I just wanted to share that information and answer any initial questions. You can email me if you get started on that and you run into a roadblock. Just send me an email. And like I said, I'm going to be setting up some more individual conferences with you later, probably next week. And I want to talk to you about that competency folio. That's one of the main things I want to talk to you about, but we can also address wherever you are in this, in your artifacts as well. So once you submit that AAPSL to TaskStream, you'll be getting a grade back, and hopefully everybody's paper is proficient so that you won't have to go back to that. You know, you have to have a 3 or a 4 for it to be proficient. And then, but you know, if the evaluator is missing something when they are evaluating that, they're going to be looking at that rubric. If they feel like something is missing from your paper, they'll send it back to you for revision. So if that happens and you need any help, make sure you let me know. Okay. Anybody else before we sign off? Anybody got a question? All right. Well, I hope you have a great evening and get a little rest and you know, tackle this AAPTEL when you're fresh. You know, after you get that AAPSL off of your plate, then sit down and spend a little time with that research. Like I said, I think once you get into it, you'll find it quite interesting. You're really going to be looking at things from an administrative view now. when you have to start dealing with the teachers. All right. Have a great evening, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.